St. Thomas explains that conscience can make mistakes, and that can occur, as we've seen, in two ways, either because of the knowledge, an erroneous knowledge, leading to an erroneous judgment about ethical truth, or because of something external to knowledge, emotions, passions, desire, anger, that lead me not to obey the dictate of conscience. We can correct our conscience, however, through improving knowledge, learning more about ethical truth, so that when we have future questions about particular actions, we can apply more correct, right knowledge to a particular action and therefore make a better, more right conclusion about the ethical quality of a particular action. Or we can also extrinsically work to order our appetites more truly towards authentic goods. But that's related more to prudence. Now, Aquinas is very interesting. He says, does conscience bind us? And does erroneous conscience bind us? And he says, yes, conscience binds us, and even a mistaken and erroneous conscience binds us. However, it's very interesting. He says that correct conscience binds us absolutely and for an intrinsic reason, which means that a right judgment of conscience, for instance, fornication with this woman, is a sin because she's not my wife, it's an act of fornication. That is absolutely and intrinsically binding because it's true. Fornication is sinful, and an act of this sort with this woman would be an act of fornication. But it also binds for an intrinsic absolute reason, because to change my mind, to change my conscience, to try to adjust my judgment about this act of fornication, that would also be itself a sin that I would have to reflect upon. So, correct judgments of conscience bind absolutely and intrinsically because they're correct, and to change a judgment, a correct judgment of conscience, would also be a sin. However, if an erroneous judgment about conscience happens, Aquinas explains they are only binding conditionally and extrinsically. What does he mean? He means that they bind us on the condition that we continue to have knowledge which isn't true. So, for example, if my conscience makes an erroneous judgment that fornication with this woman is wrong, that is only conditioned upon the fact that this woman is not my wife. However, if this woman is my wife, and that's the true knowledge, then my conscience can be corrected because I can arrive at more accurate knowledge about the present situation. And therefore, I can change this judgment about this particular act of fornication. I can correct it because it's only binding as long as I remain in this erroneous state, condition of evaluation. So the way we correct our conscience is to pursue more truth about moral knowledge and to work to live in conformity with that truth about moral reality. And if we are in a state of erroneous judgment, we have a bad conscience, we make an error about moral truth, that is not the end of the story, because we don't have to remain in an erroneous judgment, because we can learn the truth about moral reality and we can begin to live in accord with that truth.